You gotta be quiet or be on the videotape. Welcome, class, to the lecture on culture. So, hopefully, by now you viewed the two videos about what culture is. I think the one from London is quite interesting, asking all these different people in London and people not really knowing what culture is to them, but throwing out what they think it may be. Anthropologically, we define culture as a human being's way of life. That includes their behaviors, their actions, their way of viewing the world. Now, significant things from your textbook and from the lecture notes I sent you that I really want to pinpoint in this particular talk are themes of enculturation, acculturation, and ethnocentrism. So, according to your textbook and according to anthropology, enculturation, now I'm just going to add letters to the word. Enculturation is this process of learning culture that is passed down from generation to generation. So, in the discussion section of the course, I actually asked you to focus on enculturation and to share something in your cultural group that was passed down. Now, let me back up for a second and make sure that we are clear on the anthropology stance of what we're talking about on culture. Race is something very different than culture, okay? Anthropologically, there is no biological basis for race, which means there's no genetic code that can tell you what kind of race someone is. All your DNA can tell you are specific things like how much a particular hormone was expressed, such as melanin, right? So I happen to have an abundant expression of melanin, right? Whereas someone who's from Europe may have less of an expression of melanin, which means their skin tone is going to look white. My skin tone is going to be darker based on how much this hormone is expressed. When you look at the DNA sequence, you can see which proteins contributed to my DNA to tell how much of this hormone has actually been enacted. That's really what these ancestry tests are looking at. They're looking at particular hormones, proteins that are expressed that can tell you where someone's ancestry has come from. It can't tell you how. History books have sort of contributed to that story, but it definitely can allude to what region people who you descend from have lived in. Doesn't mean they've lived there forever. So, sorry to burst your bubble, those of you who've been walking around from the United States saying you're originally Nigerian. I don't want to hurt your feelings, but probably wasn't Nigeria back then, and they probably had only been there a couple hundred years. They can really be from southern Africa. Who knows? Humans migrate. That's what we do. We find opportunities and we leave. All right? So, no need to hold on to a lot of those stories that we do. But all it's going to tell you is where the people have been and to a certain part. But it's not going to be able to tell you the original sort of location they lived in or what cultural practices they picked up. It's only going to tell you what the DNA says, okay? So then culture becomes something that we hold on to based on a human need to express tradition and diversity and connection to other humans. It's not something biological. It is very much so something, as the word expresses, cultural, okay? Something humans create, not something that is biological. All right, so when we get into discussions about race, race is something that has been created by humans to justify a lot of discrimination over time. Okay, so there is no genetic black race. There's no genetic Latino race. And for those of you guys who I say play the coloring box genes, where you talk to your friends and someone's light skin, and then you go, oh, they had a dark person, oh, they had a light person, oh, they mixed together and they made a light skinned person. Okay, look, that's not how genes work at all. Okay, you can have two dark parents and come out light skinned. All right, you don't choose your genes choose you. Okay, so let's get over the coloring box stuff and stop acting like race is genetic. Right? We're over that? Okay, good. Now we can move on. So with race not being genetic and culture not being genetic, this class is about those things that humans create. And so when you pass down information from generation to generation, you create traditions, you create patterns of behavior. Now, there's other things that create patterns of behavior, right? the socioeconomic situation that people are in, the geography, the location, the environment. Politics creates things. So sometimes when we're having conversations in this class about culture, we're talking about all of that, right? So we're not just talking about what may be seen as, Asian American culture. We'd have to break down all of those different Asian cultures. We'd have to talk about the things that are shared between individuals to even be a culture, right? And then we'd have to talk about why would they even need to be shared. And that's a whole different conversation. So feel free to have more lengthy discussions in the discussion section, or maybe even go into the chat section and really dive into these concepts so that you can get more out of the classroom, okay? So in enculturation, I asked you to talk about something that you learned in your culture that was then passed down. I shared the story of learning to make tortillas. So I'm eager to look at the stories that you guys have to share. That's enculturation. So if it helps, I focus on the N, all right? I like to break words down. So in culture, okay? Shun, T-I-O-N, whenever you see that at the end of a word, it means it's a process, okay? So all you have to do is figure out the rest of the word, and it's quite simple. In, a process that's in something. And then you have the word culture. This has to do with patterns of people. So a process that is in a culture that has patterns. Easy. See? Nice. You learn something every day. Okay, so for enculturation, that's what I'm looking for. Acculturation, that is a culturation, so the process of a culture. Now, whenever you see a in front of a word, it usually symbolizes an attachment to something. So it's a part of something else that then gets attached to the word. So acculturation would mean something that is learned outside of the culture and how it impacts the culture. So let's talk about, say, what we call Latin American culture in the United States, right? So Latin American culture, and let's just face it, it's too big for us even to call it a culture, but yet and still we always attempt to act as if we know what we're talking about, right? And we tend to stay at the generalizations because you can't even talk about the specifics when you say Latin American culture because it's too diverse to even act like it. But nonetheless, let's pretend for a second. Latin American culture, what would be the key features that we would say are shared in Latin American culture? I think the only things that we can pretty much come up with is language, right? Yeah, it's a shared Spanish, not even the same kind of Spanish, but a shared language, a shared history of colonization from the Spanish coming over and taking over all of these different locations and making them colonies of Spain. So outside of that, things then become diverse. Now, when we talk about Latin American culture in the United States, this is still a part of the legacy that is shifting, that is diverse, because other groups are not going to have the same experience. So when we're talking about something as simple as tacos, right? Where do tacos come from? Now, you'll get all different kind of responses on this, right? They'll be, obviously, they're Mexican, right? And then the Mexicans in Mexico are going, what are you talking about? We didn't create that crap. And then the Mexicans that are from the U.S., poor babies, have grown up with the rest of us Americans, so they're learning things about their culture, ironically, from Americans. And we're telling them that they invented tacos, so poor things. Another thing, too, burritos, right? So how many times have you found yourself at a taco place and you've demanded all of these different things in your burrito, and you've actually gotten quite frustrated with the person for not knowing exactly how to make your burrito? Well, sorry to tell you folks, but burritos are an American invention. I know we think that it's just so Mexican just because it has the ito on it, right? It's burrito, so you're like, oh yeah, of course it's Spanish. Not at all, okay? What group of people do you know put everything in one tortilla and eat it? Americans, right? We're the only people who would even think to put everything in one thing and walk away with it. Eat it on the go. It's such an American thing, we don't even pause to think about it. We think some other culture created it and came to America with it, and now we're indulging in it and get frustrated with them as if they went to some kind of burrito school and should know how to make your burrito. Not at all. Doesn't happen. Same things with fortune cookies, right? So fortune cookies aren't Chinese. They're American. Who else wants to know their fortune in a cookie? Come on now, people. Think about these things, all right? But we just sort of consume them and act as if they're really a part of their cultures. Even if we take the initial example that we have of what is Latin American culture, the language Spanish, does that really represent the people? Or is that something that the people have had for the last 500 years? So then what would be the culture of the people before 500 years ago? I mean, they were here. They were living and breathing, getting along just fine without the Europeans. So does Spanish really represent Latin American culture? Does the culture change because the language changes? All of those things are a matter of acculturation. That's what happens when two groups get together and share information. Okay? Things shift in both groups. Okay? Actually, I always wonder what Spain thinks about the rest of the world. If they still consider. Yes, I am talking to you, Brian. Not like I think you have the answer.
Spanish from Spain?
No, I just think, I wonder what Spain thinks about its colonies now, if they think that they're connected to them, now that they're all, free from Spain. If they still treat them like, their children, or if Spain's like, I want nothing to do with you people.
They think they're the boss.
Yeah, I think they're always going to feel that way. Poor people, they have inferiority complex or something like that, because that's just ridiculous when a country feels the need to own another country. But yet we're all Americans. Okay. So that's acculturation for you. The next theme I want to get into is ethnocentrism, okay? Whenever there's an ism on the back of the word, it insinuates there's a theoretical framework for it. So I usually just say it's a theory. All right, so it's the theory of something. We have two words in the middle of that, right? Ethnocentrism. Okay, so it's the theory of something. We know it has to do with ethnicity because we have the ethno word. So ethno really means a diversity of things, specifically people. All right, and ethnicity we use to really denote where people really descend from, and we'll get into that when we talk about family, kinship systems, and marriage. But so you have race as this category that was created recently based on color, physical color. Okay, that's why we have colors like red, yellow, black, brown, white. If you took 2 seconds to think about it, it's quite weird actually. Okay, so we have race, all right, as this mythical thing that was created. We have culture in the middle, which are the things that humans create, the patterns that they create, the way they're raised, the interactions that they have, the people they interact with. And then we have ethnicity on the opposite side, which actually is where people descend from. And that ethnicity is specific to a group of people and where they are, but it shifts over time, so remember that. All right, so ethnocentrism. It's the theory of an ethnicity that is central. So essentially, in ethnocentrism, we presume that our own way of understanding the world is at the center. And so we judge other cultures based on our way of viewing the world, right? And we all do it, okay? So there will never be any professor that tells you they are free of ethnocentrism. They are special for saying that, okay? Because we struggle with it every day. I do it all the time. I think everyone should drive just like me. And I will call people racist names for not driving just like me. What, Brian? I do. You don't? No? You don't make fun of people because they drive slow?
Yeah, I do.
Right? And okay, do you make fun of their whole race for driving slow? So you don't never call the Asians slow.
I mean, there is black people
But are they old black people?
Yeah.
So we do stereotype, right? So it's related to this stereotyping. And that's ethnocentrism. And you can be really really sort of stern about these ideas, you really think the world goes this way. Give you an example. Have you ever heard of the rule that X amount of people can live in one home? Yes, right? You know where I'm going with this. All right, in LA, we have this one stereotype about Latinos that, what? Have you heard this?
You told me that.
I told you? Oh, we have this stereotype about Latinos that Latinos always have like 4 or 5 generations in one house. There's like 20 people, and we'll make tons of jokes about it, right? We'll be like, oh my God, look at them all in the car. Look at them all in the house. That's just crazy, right? But that's our own ethnic central view. We believe there's only a certain amount of people supposed to be in the house. But the one thing you'll find with this class, we'll really dive into history. Where do we get these views? Because let's just face it. It is normal to have multiple generations in a household. You need help. It takes a village. It doesn't take just one family. That's actually quite weird. We get those concepts from more European type cultures that usually have one household in the house. American cultures that refer to a family as a mother, a father, and 2.5 children, you know? But for many of us, we're used to another aunt and uncle, maybe your grandparents are in the home, maybe a god family, someone else is around the corner down the street. You know, you have a system of support. So how then are we in the US and we make fun of one particular group about doing this? Well, we've adopted ethnocentrism. We believe our way of viewing the world is the only right way. This happens with religion as well. So the whole issue with homosexuality is an ethnocentric issue. People will say, because of my religious view, I don't believe in that kind of stuff. We're not going to get into the fact that I think they didn't read the Bible appropriately or the Quran appropriately, because you're not supposed to be mistreating people, and apparently they didn't read it right. But nonetheless, people feel strong in their views. So please feel whatever you feel, because at the end of the day, I will not be at your judgment day. It will just be you. Okay, boo? So do your thing. But that's all about what you think the order of the world is, according to you. They may have some other order of the world. So how do we then live together if all of us are practicing ethnocentrism? Well, one way is to create things like the law. And fortunately for the United States, we have a law that it does practice ethnocentrism. Let's not front. But it definitely has these components written into it where people cannot be judged or condemned legally. Now, your attitude may carry it, but legally, you're not supposed to discriminate against certain groups of people based on who they are and how they are. Okay? So that's why you have all these states overturning these laws where same-sex couples can get married, because legally, you can't interfere with that. Religiously, you might disagree, but religion is not supposed to run the government, at least not this government. And so you have to, take your ethnocentrism for a moment and go, you know what? My way of viewing the world is not the only way of viewing the world, and the government should not live based on my views about how to be and when to be and where to be. And then you have to let other people live their lives the way that they are. Because at the end of the day, like I said, we won't be at each other's judgment day. And it won't be you in the background as a crowd going, oh, God, get her. None of that's going to happen, okay? It'll just be me and God going over what I've done, okay? So there's no need for the ethnocentrism. You see how it actually keeps us apart. It keeps us from understanding each other. It keeps us from cohabitating, because we're walking around with these lenses all the time, judging people on how they should be based on how we think the world should be. But we're not going to get into the hypocrisy of some of those things, because some of us judge people based on things we do ourselves. You know how it is. We're not going to talk about that. That's not in today's lesson. Actually, it's not in this semester's lesson. I wish they would let me have a talk on that. That'd be cool. But those are the 3 things of most importance at this moment I want you to think about. Enculturation, sharing within the culture. Acculturation, two cultures sharing together. Ethnocentrism, viewing another culture through your culture's lens, okay? So continue on with the videos. I believe the next two videos are my favorite. They're practically examples of enculturation and acculturation, because you're going to see the Hawaiian dancers. And unfortunately, so much has happened with colonization of Hawaii and the various Pacific islands that sometimes people are learning about their culture from afar, right? So as I use the example of Mexican American kids learning about their culture when they're in the States from textbooks and all other kind of stuff. I mean, black kids go through it too. So there's no black history that we grow up with where we know what it is. We grow up with American white history. You have the one paragraph on slavery and then they skip it because they're scared if you really know, then, you know, something to go down. And then you get a whole page on Martin Luther King as if to learn real quickly nonviolence, and then maybe, I mean, my textbook had 2 sentences on Malcolm X, like Malcolm X lived and then he died. I was like, who is this man? Why is he so significant? But you learn about these things once you're already here, and you can't get the full details of what the cultures really were because you no longer live with people who know those things. And so can you imagine having to learn from watching a video of your people dancing? You know, and people do. People will go to Africa and go to a different country in Africa and learn the dance of current day, but we don't know what our ancestors did before they were brought to this country. You know what I'm saying? And they're learning Hawaiian dance from the few elders that are dying out. You know, it's quite sad. So these videos are enculturation, but they're also acculturation, because people are learning from outside of the cultures sort of how this system works. So I think there's a procreation dance, and then there's another dance about a shark. I think it's the dance about the shark. They're both pretty cool. As I was just telling Brian like minutes ago, that all cultures seem to have dances about animals and dances about daily life. So if you think of them as sort of primitive, and quite frankly, I hate when we use that kind of language as if the civilization should happen like this, and the way Europeans and Americans do it is best, and the way our people did it who were here for thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of years are at the bottom. I think that's crazy. But there always seems to be mimicry in dance. That's the way it's supposed to be. So you're supposed to mimic the shark. You're supposed to mimic the wolf. You're supposed to mimic procreation. I mean, those are sort of the beautiful symbols of life, and it gets passed down, and you really learn different things about the environment and how it works through these systems. So you'll get to see those things. Feel free to post videos or any other examples that you guys find of what culture is, examples of ethnocentrism and enculturation or acculturation, and we'll get on with the rest of the week, okay? Take care, guys. Bye.